there is something you have seen, Scott, which is Palmer. You could tell us about that. I don't have a clever linking device, so, got standards to keep up and all.
Palmer sees the sainted Justin Timberlake, who died for her sins and brought sexy back, play Eddie Palmer. Returning to his small hometown after a lengthy stint behind bars for what is revealed eventually to be a serious assault and theft rap. He moves back in with his grandmother, June Squibbs Vivian, and tries to get his life in some sort of order in a town still wary of him, eventually becoming a janitor at the high school, at which he was once the star footballman. Intruding on his home life on occasion is the neighbour's kid, Ryder Allen Sam, a gender non-conforming lad in the area not known for welcoming such things, although Palmer is supportive. He is occasionally looked after by Vivian during the stretches where his drug-addled mother, Juno Temple's Shelley, heads off into the unknown for what is presumed to be weeks of druggery. This status quo comes to an abrupt end when, whilst she's off on one of these excursions, Vivian dies, leaving Sam, by default, in Eddie's custody, at a time when he's already dealing with the stress of loss. Ultimately, Eddie feels he cannot face putting Sam into the government care system and agrees to look after him until his mother resurfaces, aided on occasion by Sam's teacher, Alicia Wainwright's Maggie, who Eddie soon falls for. Eddie and Sam also form a solid bond over the course of things, to the point that Eddie will want to outright remove Sam from his family when Shelley and her abusive boyfriend eventually return, still using, in yet another example of why they should have been deemed unfit parents many, many years before Eddie got out of jail. This leads to an ending that for a moment convinced me it was going to take a darker turn before settling back into a more crowd-pleasing family ending, which I perhaps should have expected given the familiarity of all the elements of it to that point. If you've been to as many rodeos as we have, there's no part of Palmer that's not been seen before, if perhaps not in exactly this configuration. So Palmer is not going to win any awards for originality, or indeed any awards at all, really, unless it's a award for most adequate motion picture, which is perhaps a bit more dismissive than I mean it to be. After all, I don't think there's anything much of significance that I disliked about Palmer, and there's a lot that's somewhere between perfectly solid and good. Eddie, Sam, and to a degree Maggie are all fairly well fleshed out, believable characters, and well enough acted by all concerned. By virtue of needing to be absent for most of the film, I suppose Juno Temple's a little hard done by, but she's certainly giving it her all. I don't think there's a lot to Palmer, other than a fairly well put together, enjoyable flick to spend 100 of your Earth minutes with, but maybe that's all it needs to be. Fine out of 10.
That's already put it in a strong position this month.
Yeah, I only watched this because it was plastered over the front page of Apple TV Plus for a while.
Yeah.
I don't think I'd even heard about it otherwise. And you're right, Scott, it's nothing new here. I've seen many, many films of this broad structure, almost this exact topic. I've seen many, many of them like this that are entirely satisfactory. I don't regret watching it. It was a pleasant enough experience, but it really doesn't stand out from the crowd.
Yeah.
I think for me, the only two things that are maybe worth mentioning is I was quite impressed with Justin Timberlake in it. He's
likeable.
He's maybe trying a bit too hard to look a bit kind of grim and pouty throughout. But beyond that, I thought it was pretty solid, and it's not anything I've seen Justin Timberlake do before that I can recall this kind of role. So I thought, as a showcase for him, it's pretty reasonable.
Yeah.
And the only other thing that caught my eye is when the end credits came up and I saw the name of the director, which I did not expect. And he may well have been doing it for some time, but directed by Fisher Stevens, of all people. Who
Why do you know that name?
I can only think of Fisher Stevens as, why were you black in Short Circuit? Why? Why, Fisher Stevens? Why? Why, movie? Why?
No way.
Yes. Fisher Stevens, the white Jewish man from Chicago who played Ben Jabatuya in Short Circuit, the man from India. As we discussed on our 80s kids films episodes. Quite surprised to see that name there. But that's it. Other than that, Palmer's... it's entirely forgettable, and that's perhaps unfair because it's a well-made film and it's well enough acted. It's not anything you've not seen before, I suspect.
Mm-hmm. I imagine if I hadn't seen 30 years worth of basically this film over and over again, I'd be more impressed with it. If this was not the 1100th time I've been to this rodeo, I'd be more impressed with the clowns going off and the general milieu. But there's just not much here that you won't have seen before if you're as old and jaded as we are.
which, let us be scrupulously exact, is very old and very jaded.
We'll give over.